in the frame? Okay. So the first thing you need to know is, how does literacy rate, this is a QTD. For anybody that's never seen a QTD before, that stands for question of the day. Okay, of course, you don't abbreviate conjunctions, prepositions in a phrase like that. So question of the day, or your QTD, is, how does literacy rate affect the standard of living? Literacy rate, of course, is the collective ability of a people to be able to read and write. And if your literacy rate is low, which means people cannot read and write in your country, let's say you have a 50% literacy rate, which is considered extremely low. The United States literacy rate is 99% or 98%. It fluctuates between those percentages, which is high. Cuba, on the other hand, claims to have a 100% literacy rate. Of course, this is coming from a communist government, so we don't know if they're telling the truth or not, and I kind of find it hard to believe that everybody in the country can read and write. Of course, children don't count. This is people that are above school age, so it's the number of the adult population that can read and write. If your adult population, if there is a large percentage of your adult population that cannot read and write, then that means that they are not going to be able to perform the same kinds of jobs that people that can read and write. For instance, you can't be a very good doctor if you can't read and write. Because how are you going to read the medical books to learn which artery to cut and which artery not to cut? Because if you cut the wrong one, you kill the person on the operating table. And that's bad. Real bad. So if you got a bunch of doctors who can't read and write, and they're running around killing people, then you have what's called a bad standard of living. And a standard of living is, how well do the people in your country live? It doesn't necessarily have to do with money, but that certainly helps. I heard an old lady one time, she had a lot of money, and somebody was trying to say that they said the old saying to her that money can't buy happiness. And she quipped right back and said, but it'll sure comfort you in your misery. So, money's good, if you use it good. Some of you got that joke, some of you did not get that joke. Anyway, the standard of living has to do with how many doctors do you have in your country. They measure it by how many TVs do you have in your house, how many cars do people have in their driveways, do people have running water in their house, do people have electricity, how many infants die before they're 1 year old, because that's an indication of, are people in your country living well or not? Because that's called the infant mortality rate. If the infant mortality rate is really low, then that actually means your standard of living is high. That means people are living well. If only like 5 babies in every 100 babies die in your country, that's a pretty good infant mortality rate. If the rate is like 75 babies out of 100 die, either due to disease or bad nutrition or bad medical care, that's a really bad infant mortality rate, and that means your standard of living is low. And if you have a bad standard of living or a low standard of living, you can always trace that back to a low literacy rate. So here's the bottom line. If you're taking notes, now's the time. And if I'm moving too fast, of course, you just pause the video and go back. But the bottom line, when you're looking at this question and you want to answer it, and I'm not going to put it in complete sentences, you need to be able to, because you're probably going to write an essay on this when you come back to class. Of course, you'll have more information, statistics and such. But here's the bottom line. I'm a bottom line kind of guy, and I want you to be a bottom line kind of guy or gal, whichever you are. Just saying. Low literacy rate equals low standard. We ran out of room. That's okay, because I got a smart board. Low standard of living. high literacy rate? You guessed it, kids. High standard of living. And that's all I've got for you today. Goodbye.